Ever feel like you're running a race you can't win? Like you're pouring every ounce of yourself into something and it's still never enough? 32-year-old Boyd, a plant maintenance technician, knew that feeling intimately. 10 years in the same plant, the same shifts, the same problems, all to barely stay afloat. 2 kids, a mortgage, and a mountain of debt that seemed to grow bigger no matter how hard he worked. He was trading his life, his time, his connection to his family for a paycheck that just wasn't cutting it. He remembered dropping out of college to help his dad, thinking it would be temporary. Now, a decade later, the dream of that engineering degree felt like a faded photograph. He'd missed his son's first steps. He'd watched his vintage motorcycle rust away in the garage. Overtime had become his life. One night, it all came crashing down. Leo, his 8-year-old, had a championship little league game. Boyd promised he'd be there. But then a machine failure at the plant, a critical one. He had to stay. He walked in late to find Leo asleep, a trophy on the counter, and a look from his wife, Jessica, that cut deeper than any welding torch. Sitting in his truck, staring at the house, Boyd realized the truth. The harder he worked, the further he seemed to fall behind. It wasn't about working harder, it was about working smarter. It was time to invest in himself, in his family, in a future that wasn't just a paycheck away from disaster. It was time for a change, and it all started with a simple rule at the dinner table. Boyd's home, a small ranch house, was a testament to their struggle. The siding needed paint. The fence leaned like it was tired, just like him. Inside, it was clean. Jessica made sure of that, but always felt like a project unfinished, just like the dreams he kept putting off. $65,000 in debt loomed over them, the truck, the credit cards, the medical bills from Maya's birth, and that underwater mortgage. Every month felt like running on a treadmill that kept speeding up. His day started before dawn. 4:30 a.m., the alarm screaming him awake. Black coffee chugged down in silence. He slipped out the door, careful not to wake Jessica or the kids. The plant was a beast, roaring to life at 6:00 a.m. 12 hours, often more, wrestling with machinery, patching up problems, breathing in the fumes. 10 years of this. The grease etched into his hands felt like a permanent brand. At 32, he felt older. He remembered the pride he felt when he bought that house. The first real home for his family. He remembers teaching Leo to ride his bike, no training wheels, just him running alongside, yelling, "You got it, son!" Those moments were getting rarer. The plant always needed him. Overtime always called. The phone ringing during Maya's dance recital. "Emergency shutdown, Boyd. We need you here now." Dinner was a blur. 7:00 p.m. He'd usually eat alone. Jessica would already have fed the kids, then would say, "There's leftovers in the fridge." His daughter, Maya, always wanted to sit with him, but he would say, "Not tonight, princess. Daddy is tired." 7:30 p.m., a quick, tired hug for Leo and Maya before their bedtime. A zombie-like stare at the TV until 10:00 p.m. Then collapse into bed only to repeat it all again. He was living on autopilot, a cog in the machine he was paid to fix. His breaking point was Leo's game. "I'll be there, buddy, I promise," he'd said. He saw Leo's face light up. Later that night, the disappointment on Jessica's face was the last straw. It wasn't anger, but a deep, quiet sadness. "He really wanted you there, Boyd," she whispered. "He made you a sign." That sign was now crumpled at the bottom of his toolbox. He sat in his truck, the engine idling, the weight of it all crushing him. This wasn't living, it was just existing. He'd become the spitting image of his old man, a life spent on the clock. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. Enough was enough. He would never miss another little league game again. He would be present for his children. He would invest his time wisely, and his family would reap the benefit. The 4:30 a.m. alarm was a brutal jolt. Boyd slammed the snooze, the dull ache in his lower back already a familiar companion. Black coffee chugged standing at the kitchen counter, a silent ritual before facing another day. Jessica was still asleep. He pecked her forehead gently, careful not to wake her. She stirred slightly, muttering something about medical bills, and his stomach tightened. $12,000 in high-interest credit cards. It was a weight that never lifted. He pulled on his worn work boots, the familiar scent of oil and metal clinging to them. Out the door by 5:00 a.m. The drive to the plant was a symphony of grumbling engines and bleary-eyed commuters. Boyd merged onto the highway, the rising sun painting the sky in shades of gray and orange. He passed the community college, the one he dropped out of at 19. Regret a cold knot in his gut. He could have been an engineer. Now he was just fixing the machines, a temporary measure that became a life sentence. The plant loomed, a sprawling beast of concrete and steel. Boyd clocked in at 6:00 a.m. sharp. Another 12-hour shift stretched before him, possibly more if something broke. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, a constant, irritating hum. Shift supervisor Gary greeted him with a weary nod. "Main conveyors acting up again, Boyd? Just like yesterday." Boyd sighed internally. Same problems, different day. He grabbed his toolbox, the worn leather handle familiar in his calloused hand. The air inside the plant was thick with the smell of oil, chemicals, and the metallic tang of welding. Boyd moved through the maze of machinery, his eyes scanning for anything out of place. He found the conveyor belt grinding and screeching. Metal fatigue. He spent the next 4 hours diagnosing the problem, replacing worn rollers and tightening bolts. His body ached, but his mind was sharp. He saw the interconnected parts, the systems within systems. That was his gift, his hidden strength. Lunch was a hurried sandwich eaten in the break room, the TV blaring with daytime talk shows. The other guys swapped stories about overtime and bills. Boyd stayed silent, picking at his food. Felt disconnected, a ghost in his own life. A text from Jessica flashed on his phone. "Maya's recital tonight, 6 p.m. His heart sank. He was supposed to be there, but the machine wasn't going to fix itself. At 5:30 p.m., Gary approached him. "We need you to stay, Boyd." Belt snapped. "We can't shut down the line." Boyd's stomach churned. He thought of Leo's little league game the previous night. He thought of the crumpled sign at the bottom of his toolbox. He looked at Gary, his face a mask of weary resignation. "I can't, Gary. I have to be somewhere." But the words felt hollow, defeated. He knew what was coming. Gary's voice was low, firm. "I need you, Boyd. Just an hour, maybe 2. We'll pay you double." Boyd closed his eyes, the image of Maya in her little tutu dancing in his head. He saw Leo's face as he walked in late to the baseball game, the other parents already packing up. He felt the weight of the $65,000 in debt pressing down on him, a cold hand on his chest. He opened his eyes, his voice barely a whisper. "I can't, Gary. I can't." The plant manager, Mr. Henderson, appeared, his face tight with barely contained fury. "Boyd, this is insubordination. You know the consequences." Boyd met his gaze, a spark of defiance flickering in his tired eyes. "I'm not abandoning my job, Mr. Henderson. I'm done sacrificing everything for it." He knew he was risking his livelihood, but in that moment the thought of another missed recital, another disappointed child, was more terrifying. He clocked out, the fluorescent lights of the plant casting long shadows across the parking lot. As he walked to his truck, he felt a strange sense of calm wash over him, a quiet resignation mixed with a flicker of hope. He reached for his phone, his finger hovering over Jessica's number. He knew he had to tell her, but he didn't know what to say. He dialed the number, his heart pounding in his chest. Jessica answered on the third ring, her voice tight with controlled frustration. "Boyd, where are you?" Maya's about to go on. He swallowed hard, the words catching in his throat. I can't make it, Jess. I'm sorry." The belt snapped. They needed me. There was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line. He could almost feel her disappointment radiating through the phone. "I see," she said finally, her voice flat. "Just like Leo's game." He closed his eyes, the guilt washing over him. "I tried, Jess, I really did. But they needed me. I get paid $29 an hour, and this overtime would help us catch up." The silence stretched on, amplifying the hum of the factory lights in his ears. "It's never enough, is it, Boyd? It's always the plant, always the money." "What about us? What about your family?" Her words were like a punch to the gut. He had no answer. He was failing them, all of them. He drove home in a daze, the familiar route feeling foreign and hostile. Pulling into the driveway, he saw the small house, its peeling paint and leaning fence a stark reminder of his failures. He sat in his truck, staring at the house, a cold knot of dread tightening in his stomach. The lights were on, casting a warm glow through the windows. He knew Jessica and the kids were inside, waiting for him. He took a deep breath and walked inside. The scene that greeted him was even worse than he had imagined. Maya was in her pajamas, clutching a stuffed animal, her face streaked with tears. Leo sat at the kitchen table, fiddling with his championship trophy, his face unreadable. Jessica stood by the sink, her arms crossed, her eyes red and swollen. The trophy sat on the counter. The silence in the room was deafening. He looked at his children, their faces etched with disappointment and a subtle sadness. He looked at Jessica, her eyes filled with a mixture of anger and heartbreak. He finally understood. The overtime, the extra shifts, the sacrifices, they weren't bringing them closer. They were tearing them apart. He had been so focused on providing for his family that he had forgot to be a part of it. Boyd looked down, then slowly back up and met Jessica's stare with a fresh tear in his own eye. He was trading his life and his connection to his family for a paycheck that barely kept them afloat. He didn't just arrive home to find Leo's small trophy on the kitchen counter and his son already asleep. He saw the look of profound, quiet disappointment from his wife, and that was the final straw. Sitting in his truck in the driveway later that night, he had a devastating realization. Working harder wasn't the solution, it was the problem. He'd been confusing activity with achievement. He made a decision. He had to stop investing all his extra time in his employer and start investing it strategically in himself and his own future. The next morning, he would start planning. Boyd stared at the cracked dashboard of his truck. The low hum of the engine was the only sound in the cab. He gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. His mind raced, replaying the scene in the kitchen. Leo's trophy, Jessica's eyes. It was a picture of his failure, painted in the muted colors of a suburban ranch house at night. He was 32 years old, a plant maintenance technician with 10 years under his belt, and what did he have to show for it? A mountain of debt, a house that needed repairs he never got around to, and a family that was slowly drifting away. "I'm done," he whispered, the words catching in his throat. He remembered his own father, working the same grind, same hours, same tired resignation etched on his face. That wasn't going to be him. He wouldn't let that cycle repeat. He thought of the engineering program he dropped out of at 19, the vintage motorcycle rusting in the garage under a tarp, the small fabrication business plan he'd been too scared to pursue. All those dreams traded for the illusion of security. Now he sees he was being buried. The image of Leo's face when he missed the game flashed in his mind. The boy idolized him, saw him as some kind of hero who could fix anything. But what kind of hero misses his son's championship game? What kind of provider neglects the very people he is trying to provide for? He felt a surge of anger, not at the plant, not at the debt, but at himself. He had let this happen. He had allowed the system to trap him. Boyd shut off the truck. The sudden silence was heavy. He reached into his toolbox in the truck bed, pulling out the worn notebook containing his business plan. He hadn't looked at it in months, fear holding him back. Opening it to the first page, he saw his handwriting, the ideas and notes he'd scribbled in the margins of maintenance manuals during his lunch breaks. Ideas he had forgotten or had buried under a pile of overtime shifts. He flipped through the pages, a flicker of hope igniting in his chest. It wouldn't be easy. He still had to work, still had to pay the bills. But he could start small, a few hours in the garage after the kids were asleep. He could learn new skills, refine his plan, and slowly, methodically build something for himself. Something that his son could be proud of. A future where his family was his priority, not just a byproduct of his paycheck. He walked back into the house, the notebook tucked under his arm. Jessica was still in the kitchen, cleaning up. Walked over to her, his heart pounding. "Jess," he said, his voice rough. She looked up, her expression guarded. He took a deep breath. "I messed up. I know that. I'm sorry." He paused, needing to get this right. "I'm going to change things, I promise. No more missed games." Jessica's eyes softened slightly, but she didn't say anything. "I have an idea. I am going to start working towards something more." He continued. "It's going to take time, but I have to start. I will start by spending every dinner at that table with all of you, no matter what. That is my rule. That is my start." She looked at him. Hope and relief filled her eyes. "That's all I ever wanted, Boyd." That night, Boyd kept his promise. He sat at the dinner table with Jessica, Leo, and Maya. It wasn't a magical reunion. Leo, still disappointed about the game, barely spoke. Maya chattered about her day, oblivious to the tension hanging in the air. Jessica watched Boyd carefully, a mixture of hope and skepticism in her eyes. But Boyd stayed. He listened. He asked questions. He put down his phone. The next morning, the alarm blared at 4:30 a.m. Boyd hit snooze, something he hadn't done in years. Not because he was tired, but because he was thinking about the dinner table rule, thinking about how he could make it work, how he could carve out time for his family and his future. He pictured Leo's downcast face, the Little League trophy gathering dust on the counter. The weight of his $65,000 debt still pressed down, but it felt different now, lighter somehow. At the plant, Boyd worked with a newfound focus, not just to get the job done, but to get it done efficiently. He streamlined his workflow, delegated tasks, and even suggested improvements to his supervisor, something he usually avoided. He wanted to get home in time. 10 years of experience as a plant maintenance technician had taught him how to fix problems, but this was a different kind of problem to solve. The first few weeks were a struggle. Overtime requests piled up, demanding his attention. His coworkers ribbed him about going soft. Jessica was still wary. "It's just dinner, Boyd," she said one night. "It doesn't erase everything else." He knew she was right. This was just the start, but Boyd persevered. Every evening, no matter how tired, he made it to the dinner table. He started helping Maya with her coloring books, listening to Leo ramble about baseball stats. One night, Leo looked up at him, a small smile on his face. "Thanks for being here, Dad." That was the turning point. He started spending a few hours in the garage after the kids were asleep. Dusting off the vintage motorcycle, he ran his hands over the cold metal. He thought of the half-finished engineering degree he abandoned at 19, the regret that had haunted him for years. Now, at 32, he had a new direction. He started small, watching YouTube videos on welding techniques, sketching designs in his notebook. He knew he couldn't quit his job, not with the mortgage, the truck loan, the medical bills. But he could start building a bridge to a different future, one weld at a time, one dinner at a time. He was still scared, still uncertain. But for the first time in years, Boyd felt like he was finally in control. He was no longer just reacting to the demands of his job. He was building something of his own, one simple dinner table rule at a time. The greasy steering wheel felt different in Boyd's calloused hands. Not just cold metal and worn plastic, but a promise. A pact made in the cab of his dented F-150. He had to stop trading his life for a paycheck. $65,000 in debt, truck loan, credit cards, medical bills, mortgage, felt like a ball and chain anchoring him to the plant. But the real debt, he realized, was to Leo and Maya, to Jessica, to himself. Fear gnawed at him. Quitting wasn't an option, not yet. He was a plant maintenance technician, 10 years in. It was all he knew, really, since dropping out of that engineering program to help his dad. Regret was a bitter taste he'd swallowed too many times. But the thought of another 10 years, another 20, watching his kids grow up through the grimy windows of the plant, that was a different kind of fear. A sharper one. Hope flickered, fragile as a pilot light. The custom fabrication shop sketched in the worn notebook in his toolbox. It seemed a lifetime away, a stupid dream, yet there it was. He gripped the wheel tighter. He pictured Leo, his son, covered in sparks, learning to weld. He saw his own hands, teaching him the craft, passing on something besides exhaustion. It was a long shot, but he had to try. Walking into the ranch house, the air felt heavy with unspoken disappointment. Jessica met him at the door, her eyes tired. "Dinner's on the table." Not angry, just resigned. He knew she'd heard it all before, empty promises whispered over microwaved leftovers. This time had to be different. He would make it different. He sat down at the table. Leo chattered about a home run he almost hit. Maya, missing a front tooth, showed him a drawing of a unicorn. Boyd listened. Really listened. He asked questions. He laughed. For the first time in months, he felt present. Not just a tired body going through the motions, but a father. That night, after the kids were asleep and Jessica was catching up on bills, Boyd slipped out to the garage. The vintage motorcycle, a '72 Triumph Bonneville, sat under a tarp, gathering dust. A relic of a younger Boyd, a Boyd with dreams. He pulled off the tarp, the scent of oil and rust filling the air. Running his hand over the cold chrome, he felt a spark. Not just a spark of metal, but a spark of hope. The engine would roar again, and so would he. The first week was hell. Boyd woke at 4:30 a.m., the same as always, but the black coffee tasted like ash. Every muscle screamed. 10 years of turning wrenches, lifting heavy machinery was catching up. His back ached, a dull, persistent throb that radiated down his leg. He wanted to call in sick, to bury himself under the covers and escape. But Leo's face flashed in his mind. The trophy on the kitchen counter. He swallowed the pain and went to work. The plant felt different, heavier somehow. Every clang of metal, every hiss of steam, a reminder of the life he was trying to escape. He still performed his duties, diagnosing problems, repairing equipment, keeping the gears turning. But now each task was tinged with a new urgency. He wasn't just fixing machines, he was buying time. Time to rebuild the Bonneville, time to learn, time to be a father. There were moments he almost quit, when a hydraulic line burst, soaking him in scalding fluid. When his supervisor, a gruff man named Earl, piled on more overtime. Boyd were short-handed. "Need you to pull a double." Boyd almost snapped, almost walked out then and there. But he bit his tongue, thinking about Jessica working double shifts at the medical office, trying to make ends meet. He mumbled a "yes, sir," the words tasting like defeat. That evening, Boyd came home later than promised. Leo, drawing in the kitchen, looked up, his face falling slightly. "Dad, you said..." Boyd knelt down, putting a hand on his son's shoulder. "I know, buddy. Something came up at work. I'm sorry." He pulled out a small, die-cast model car he'd grabbed at the gas station. "Here, thought you might like this." Leo's face brightened. A small victory. Boyd's hidden strength wasn't physical, it was the memory of his father. The man worked his fingers to the bone at the same factory, same shift. Boyd remembered him coming home smelling of oil and sweat, but always finding time to help with homework to coach his baseball team. He vowed to be that kind of father. He'd let that promise fade. No more. Jessica saw the change, small things. He wasn't just collapsing in front of the TV after dinner. He was helping with the dishes, asking about her day. One evening, she found him in the garage, tinkering with the motorcycle. "What are you doing, Boyd?" He looked up, grease smudged on his cheek. "Trying to fix something," he said. "Something important." She smiled, a real smile, not the tired, polite one he'd been seeing for months. "Good," she said. "It's about time." The engine would roar again, and so would he. Day 12. Boyd's alarm still screamed at 4:30 a.m., but something felt different. He didn't hit snooze. He didn't dread the day ahead. Before heading to the plant, he spent 15 minutes in the garage, not just staring at the vintage motorcycle under the tarp, but actually working on it. Tightening bolts, oiling chains, small steps but forward motion. Jessica found him there, sipping coffee. "You're up early," she said, surprised. "Yeah," Boyd replied, not meeting her gaze. "Gotta get this thing running again." A long pause. "For Leo," he added, finally looking at her. "He'd love to ride it someday." At the plant, things were different. He still fixed machines, still dealt with the same endless grind, but his focus had shifted. Instead of just reacting to problems, he started thinking about the asterisk why. Why was this machine failing? What could be done to prevent it in the future? He even started sketching out a new design for a conveyor belt support, something he'd been thinking about for years. His coworker, Marcus, noticed. "You seem lighter, Boyd. What's going on?" Boyd shrugged. "Just trying to be smarter, not harder." Day 16. Dinner. The new ritual. The dinner table rule. No phones, no TV, just family. Leo chattered about his baseball practice. Maya showed off a drawing of a unicorn. Jessica talked about a difficult patient at the clinic. Boyd listened. Really listened. He even asked questions. Small questions, but questions nonetheless. Before dinner had been a race to the finish line, a fuel stop before collapsing for the night. Now it was connection. He saw the relief in Jessica's eyes, the way Leo beamed when he asked about his batting average. Debt still loomed, $65,000, a mountain of stress, but Boyd wasn't just throwing overtime at it anymore. He started researching small business loans, talking to a local banker about his fabrication shop idea. It was a long shot, he knew. But for the first time in years, he felt like he was working asterisk towards asterisk something, not just running in place. He spent an hour each evening studying welding techniques online, watching videos, honing his skills. He remembered his community college engineering program, dropped at 19. It was a regret that ate at him. Maybe he could find a local program online. Day 21, 3 weeks. 3 weeks of small changes. 3 weeks of fighting against the inertia of years of habit. He woke up before dawn again. Another session in the garage, the motorcycle slowly coming back to life. Jessica came out, wrapping her arms around him from behind. "Thank you, Boyd," she whispered. He turned, surprised. "For what?" She smiled. "For being here." He knew what she meant, not just physically present, but present, engaged. He hadn't been there for years. The weight of the debt, the long hours, had slowly eroded his soul. He'd been a ghost in his own home. That night, Leo asked him to play catch in the backyard. The sky was a dusky orange. Boyd hadn't thrown a baseball in months. His arm ached after a few minutes, but he kept throwing. Leo laughed, chasing after a wild pitch. Boyd smiled. A real smile, one that reached his eyes. He looked at his son, his wife, his house. It wasn't much, but it was his, and he wasn't going to let it slip away. He would be there, he would provide, but not at the cost of everything that mattered. He would finish that engineering degree. He would get a loan for the fabrication shop, quit his job. He wasn't just a plant maintenance technician anymore. He was a father. A husband, a man with a plan, a man with hope. The motorcycle engine roared to life. The sound of his new life. Day 30, 1 month in, checkpoint. A nervous energy crackled in Boyd's movements now. It wasn't the frantic, desperate energy of a man drowning. It was the focused hum of a motor being tuned. 30 days since he sat in his truck, defeated, Leo's trophy a silent accusation. 30 days since he decided to fight for his life, not just his paycheck. Changes were visible, small at first, now undeniable. Jessica noticed. The tension lines around her eyes softened. She started leaving little notes for him on the coffee maker. "Have a good day, love you," or a simple heart. He found himself lingering in the kitchen in the mornings, actually seeing her instead of just grabbing his coffee and disappearing. One morning, she stopped him, touched the scar above his eyebrow. "You look lighter," she said, searching his face. Boyd didn't know how to explain it, not really. He just hugged her tight, a wordless promise. The kids noticed too. Maya started climbing onto his lap again during their family movie nights. Leo peppered him with questions about the motorcycle, his eyes shining. "Can I help you fix it, Dad? Please?" Boyd had been so distant, so absorbed in his own exhaustion that he hadn't even realized how much he was missing. The house felt warmer, brighter, somehow. Even work noticed. Not in a good way. He wasn't volunteering for every overtime shift anymore. When the foreman, Hank, asked him to stay late to fix a busted pump, Boyd politely refused. "Gotta get home, Hank. Promised my son I'd help him with his science project." Hank just grunted, but Boyd didn't back down. He saw the raised eyebrows, the whispers in the break room. He didn't care. His priorities had shifted. His coworkers had always known him as a dependable, always available drone. They could adjust. His bank account hadn't magically refilled itself. The $65,000 in debt still loomed, a dark cloud. But the weight felt different now. It wasn't crushing him, it was a challenge to overcome. He was researching online engineering programs at night after the kids were asleep. He found a reasonably priced one at a state school. He even talked to Jessica about taking out a small loan to get the fabrication shop started. She was hesitant, scared, but she saw the fire in his eyes. She remembered that Boyd, the one with dreams. "Let's look at the numbers," she said, her voice softer than he'd heard in a long time. One evening, while working on the bike in the garage, Leo came out with a drawing. A crudely drawn picture of a motorcycle, a father and son side by side. "That's our shop, Dad," he said, beaming. Boyd felt a lump in his throat. He looked at his son, at the drawing, at the dusty tools scattered around the garage. This wasn't just about getting out of debt or starting a business. It was about building something that would last, something to pass on to his son. It was about finally becoming the man he always wanted to be. He'd been so close to losing it all. He never would again. The new routine settled in like a well-worn wrench in Boyd's hand. Wake up at 4:30, coffee, then straight to the garage. No TV, no mindless scrolling. Just him, the resurrected motorcycle frame, and the hum of the welding machine. He was using his old skills, the ones he'd almost forgotten, the ones that made him feel alive. He was welding custom brackets for a sidecar, a project for a local charity auction. Time was tight, but it was his time. His days at the plant were different too. Boyd, the 32-year-old plant maintenance technician, still did his job, still fixed the machines that kept the factory running. But now he did it with a quiet focus, a sense of purpose that had been missing for years. He wasn't just putting out fires, he was strategically managing his time. He started documenting every breakdown, every fix, building a database of common problems and efficient solutions. This was for him, not the company. Knowledge he could use later for his own shop. Jessica noticed, not with grand pronouncements or tearful declarations, but in small ways. A hand on his back as he bent over the sink, washing grease from his hands. A shared smile across the dinner table. He was actually asterisk at the dinner table now, not just a tired shadow passing through. 8-year-old Leo's science project, a volcano made from a soda bottle and baking soda, was a joint effort, not just a last-minute rush by Jessica. 5-year-old Maya insisted on wearing the safety glasses Boyd had bought for the garage, marching around the house pretending to weld. One afternoon, Hank, his coworker, stopped him by the time clock. "Heard you been turning down overtime, Boyd?" Boyd just looked at him, waiting. "Just wondering, everything all right?" There was a hint of concern in Hank's voice, maybe even a little respect. "Better than all right, Hank," Boyd said, his voice firm. "Working on something for myself, for my family." Hank nodded slowly, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. "Good for you, Boyd, good for you." Boyd spent every spare moment in his garage. The motorcycle project was coming along, the frame gleaming under the shop light. He was also sketching designs for his fabrication shop, layouts for equipment, ideas for marketing. He even started cold calling local businesses, offering his welding and repair services. It was slow going, but he landed a small contract fixing gates at a nearby farm. $300 cash? It wasn't much, but it was a start. A tangible sign that his dream wasn't just a fantasy. "Look at this, Jess," he said, placing the crisp bills on the kitchen table. Jessica picked them up, her fingers tracing the edges. "From the farm?" she asked, her voice tinged with surprise. Boyd nodded. "First payment, just the beginning." He saw a glimmer of hope in her eyes, a flicker of the woman he fell in love with, the one who believed anything was possible. They talked late that night, huddled over the kitchen table, crunching numbers. The engineering program, the shop loan, the debt. It was still daunting, but now they were facing it together, a team. Boyd's back still ached, the tension headaches still lingered, but they were fading. He wasn't just surviving, he was building. He was showing his son, not just telling him, what it meant to work hard to chase a dream to be a man. And he was finally starting to believe it himself. The vintage motorcycle, the fabrication shop, the family dinners, it was all connected. He was rebuilding more than just machines, he was rebuilding his life. The following weeks blurred into a rhythm of work, family, and progress. Boyd, the 32-year-old plant maintenance technician, felt a surge of energy he hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't just the money from the odd jobs, it was the validation, the sense of control. At the plant, his expertise became even more valued. He wasn't just fixing machines, he was optimizing them, suggesting improvements that streamlined processes. His boss noticed. "Boyd, you've been on fire lately," he said one afternoon, clapping him on the shoulder. "I'm putting you in for that lead tech position. You deserve it." The promotion meant more responsibility, sure, but it also meant a salary bump and a renewed sense of purpose. He could finally breathe a little easier, knowing they could start tackling those credit card debts and medical bills. He even allowed himself to dream about the engineering program again, maybe taking online courses at night. The weight on his shoulders eased and his back didn't ache quite so much. One evening, Boyd came home to the smell of Jessica's lasagna, a rare treat. Leo, 8, ran to greet him with a drawing of a motorcycle meticulously detailed. "It's your bike, Dad, the one you're fixing." Maya, 5, chimed in, "It's the bestest bike ever." At dinner, the conversation flowed easily. Leo told him about his baseball practice, Maya recounted a story from school, and Jessica shared good news from her receptionist job. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. It was connection. "I have some news too," Boyd said, a smile playing on his lips. He told them about the promotion, the raise, the possibilities it opened up. Leo pumped his fist. Jessica's eyes glistened. "That's amazing, Boyd," she said, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. "I'm so proud of you." That night, after the kids were asleep, Boyd and Jessica sat on the porch swing, the cool night air a welcome contrast to the heat of the day. "Remember that dream you had about the shop?" Jessica asked softly. He nodded, his gaze fixed on the stars. "It's not just a dream anymore, is it?" He wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. "No, Jess, it's not. The promotion was more than just a title and a pay bump. It was validation. 10 years. 10 years of grease, grit, and busted knuckles in that plant. 10 years he sometimes felt he'd thrown away. But maybe, just maybe, it wasn't all for nothing. Maybe all those nights wrestling with broken machinery, all those missed dinners, all those apologies to Leo and Maya were finally starting to pay off in more than just dollars and cents. Boyd found himself standing in the garage later that week, the scent of oil and metal strangely comforting. He ran a hand over the tarp covering the vintage motorcycle, the one he'd started rebuilding years ago, before life squeezed the joy out of everything. The motorcycle still felt like a symbol of who he used to be, the man he was losing. But now, with this promotion, with the debt starting to shrink, maybe he could find that guy again. Maybe he could even build something better. He started small. Instead of collapsing in front of the TV after dinner, he spent an hour in the garage, cleaning the workbench, organizing his tools. Jessica came out one evening, leaning against the doorframe. "What are you up to?" she asked, a hint of curiosity in her voice. "Just getting things in order," Boyd replied, avoiding her gaze. He wasn't ready to tell her about the shop yet, not until he had something real to show for it. The weeks turned into months. Boyd continued his routine. Up before dawn, work hard at the plant, come home, spend time with his family, then disappear into the garage for an hour or two. He started sketching designs, researching equipment, making calls. He even dusted off his old engineering textbooks, the ones he'd packed away when he left community college. He would sit in the garage at night and use his plant skills to analyze different business needs, how to connect the various parts. Each night he would find himself sketching out plans for his dream fabrication shop. One Saturday, Leo came out to the garage while Boyd was welding a new bracket for the motorcycle. He watched, fascinated, as the sparks flew and the metal fused together. "Can I try, Dad?" Leo asked, his eyes wide with excitement. Boyd hesitated, then handed him a pair of safety glasses. "All right, son, let's see what you got." It was a clumsy first attempt, but Leo was beaming. In that moment, Boyd realized he wasn't just building a shop, he was building something to pass down. It was more than just financial security, it was